before we talk about Cape Town, the last time we were all on the broadcast together, was it Javelina? Javelina, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a month ago. Brett, you had a great race there. I know we did an entire episode on it, but you want to give like a 1 minute quick recap about how it went and whether or not it was a breakthrough race for you?
I mean, it was 100% a breakthrough race. It was better than any scenario I played out in my head. It was cool to see a different like style of training that I did actually changed something. I'm still not recovered. My knee is kind of jacked up, but that's okay. Still get to talk about running. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Those are my life updates.
And Leah, you were just in Thailand, and we didn't do an episode yet. So maybe, just talk about how the day went and how everything fared.
Well, I'll preface this with saying that it was a very long travel day or 2 days to get out there. And lucky for me, I got to live stream the Javelina coverage on my 12-hour flight to South Korea. So I got to watch a lot of Brett's race while he was doing that and text you back and forth, Finn. So yeah, highly recommend that to anybody who has a long flight. Just plan it over some Javelina live coverage next time. It's time well spent. But yeah, Thailand in general was an amazing experience. Got to be a part of the 80K World Mountain Running Championships on Team USA with Caitlin Gerbin, Addie Bracey, and Brittany Charbonneau. And we came away with a 5th place women's team finish, which was an incredible experience. Just such a hard course. And I think it was evidence to me of just needing to be able to push yourself for, 9 hours and work very, very hard in that environment, just with that depth of athletes out there. Had a really great day myself that I'm really proud of, but yeah, didn't quite meet my high goals of a top 10 finish. But I think that just really speaks to the depth of competition that was out there. But all around, an incredible experience.
I think we'll talk in a sec about just how impressed we are with this whole Cape Town setup and how it makes us want to probably be there at the same time next year. But with Worlds, I know that the experience was amazing, but did it make you want to do this like every single year in the same way we think about like making UTMB a priority or Western States, stuff like that? Like, what's your thinking there?
Yeah, definitely. And it's tough too. Next year's World Championships will be in June. I believe 2 or 3 weeks out from Western States and Lavaredo and races like that, Broken Arrow, that already get a high level of competition. So I think that's going to be a big challenge. And it's one I've been chatting with a few people about. But yeah, it makes you want to go back again and again, and still need to decide my race calendar for next year. But yeah, it's definitely now pulling me a little bit more in that direction than I would have anticipated it.
Brett, you told me offline that Lake Sonoma was actually a qualifying race for this next year. I had no idea. And are you going to try to throw your hat in the ring there and qualify for Worlds given that?
That would be pretty cool. I gotta
not to put you on blast.
I gotta get to the point where I can run more than like 3 miles before my knee getting pissed at me. So that's the first priority, but it seems to be trending in the upward direction. I went 4 miles this morning and it only hurt a little bit at the end. So I love Lake Sonoma. That course is really fun, and I've run it twice and I'm pretty familiar. But, I think I'll know in a couple months if that's something I really want to push for, because there's also just a lot of other races out there that I haven't done that I just want to go and do. Like that was kind of the case with Javelina, where it wasn't necessarily chasing a golden ticket, but just I wanted to go do Javelina because everyone says Javelina is awesome, and they were all right.
We're kind of veterans at this now. Like, we've been together for Speed Goat, for UTMB, for Western States, for Javelina. And I think in each of those cases, we knew a fair bit about the courses and the history, et cetera, going in. At least for me, talking about Cape Town, like I knew next to nothing about this race maybe a week or two ago. I now know a fair bit. And like I said a minute ago, like I'm super inspired. Before we put this on our calendar, what did you guys like? What were your initial impressions about Ultra Trail Cape Town? Again, before you knew everything you know now. And maybe Leah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'm in the same boat as you, Finn. I knew generally nothing about this race, just that it was the end of the season competitive race that usually got decent depth of athletes running it, and that it was in Cape Town, went up Table Mountain once, and that's about it. Heard it was beautiful, technical, and ran like a pretty hard 100K. But it's gotten some really solid American competition in recent years with Courtney DeWalter and Jim Walmsley, both having wins here last year, and I think Cody Reed in the past as well. So that's the extent of my knowledge, and I will say, like, I dove deep this last week, and I'm really excited with everything I learned.
How about you, Brett?
Yeah, I've followed the race a little bit in the last few years, but never like how I will this weekend, probably being glued to the live stream.
Which looks amazing, by the way.
Yeah. I'm so excited about that. Which, we'll get into like when these races are and how to watch them. But my previous knowledge of the course was like, for some reason, like Americans have had a lot of success at this race, and it sounds quite hard, but in ways that, I don't know, I guess don't normally come about in these races. Like none of the climbs are like super, super big. But at the same, and it doesn't sound like the weather is ever really horrific. It sounds like there can be a decent range of weather, but this season's, it's just now getting into summer over there, right?
Yeah, that's crazy to think that, like, I mean, it is a Southern Hemisphere race, and like this is like an early summer season race for them. Yeah,
so it's like now doing a lot of homework on this race, like I kind of get why you might go and do this race. It's like you're kind of in that, it's just starting to be winter, but I'm still running pretty well, and it's getting kind of snowy. Oh, look at this. I can go escape this kind of weather that sucks at my house and go do one last awesome race. And yeah, it really kind of seems like it's turning into kind of the premier, like, end of the season trail race.
One thing, I want to make a comment, and then I want to throw it out to both of you guys. Leah, you just competed at Worlds. It was a stacked race. Brett, you were at Javelina, also a stacked race. Neither of those races were UTMB affiliated events. Cape Town is not a UTMB affiliated event. There are UTMB races also happening concurrently, but it seems like to me, the most competitive fields have been at each of these three places. So I think what I want to talk about before we get into the course and stuff is how a race like Cape Town exists and thrives from a competition standpoint in a world where UTMB is trying to create a monopoly and cash in on that monopoly. So I don't know, Leah, do you have any thoughts on why Cape Town has been able to field such a strong race this year?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, has to do with just the professionalism of the event. I think a lot of things go into that. That might be live coverage. That might be the investment that they put into their elite athletes. I think those are two large components of it. And just the history behind the race. I think when people see a race year after year be competitive and bring consistent depth, they're more attracted to it. It's similar to the reason that we don't really see a deep level of competition at Run Rabbit every year. It's like money doesn't necessarily talk, but competition and, like, I think, the emphasis on the things that matter do. So I think that's why we're seeing it, Cape Town have kind of the reins it does this year. Like, it's attracting a deeper field than we saw at, UTMB Mexico and likely UTMB Thailand as well.
What do you think, Brett?
So I've yet to really hear anything bad about this race. Like, I haven't really heard any negatives come about it of like, oh, I did it and like this was this way or this was that way. It was more like I did this race and then I told every single person I knew this race, the event, the area, so awesome, do it. So there's that, which hasn't necessarily been the case with all things UTMB. There's been lots of positive chatter, but there's almost been equal amounts of negative chatter across the entire UTMB brand and the races and the race series and the whole World Series. The other thing is the courses are really cool. I mean, that's kind of one of the main reasons why, UTMB, the big loop around the mountain just kind of turned into, like the world championships runner. Like, it's a badass loop. And that's kind of how Ultra Trail Cape Town's turning into as well. Like the 100 mile and the 100K have, I guess the 100 miles like it's like a figure eight. 100K is just one loop. There's no overlap in trail. You get to see like a huge, variety of different types of terrains. And that's another huge reason why this race has been successful. Like everyone says, like the course is just a really great challenge and it's beautiful. And, at its core, that's still a lot of the reason why so many people, elites included, will go run a race.
Leah, when you're building a calendar, like for 2023, for example, are you motivated by, like when you're thinking about like a season long narrative and like how your season's going to play out, do you think about it in terms of like the event series that you want to be a part of, or are you picking it on like a race by race basis, just based on like how that race is run and stuff like that?
Yeah, something I've actually been telling a lot of people when it comes to getting into UTMB or UTMB race for next year is like, I do not want to go out of my way to get into UTMB next year. Like if it happens intrinsically in a race that like I'm inspired by and I'm already doing, that's great. Or if I get in by the lottery, that's great. But I'm not going out of my way to get into it. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way. So for me, I'm more inspired by, going to a new place, seeing a new course, being inspired by the actual course, and then, finding those A races that meet those needs and then catering the rest of my training races and training schedule around that. And I have a feeling like as UTMB starts to monopolize more and more, we might see more people coming to races like UT Cape Town where, it's an inspiring course and like they're checking a lot of the boxes and I think they're pushing all the different capacities of the race, pushing it forward and pushing ultra running in general forward in a variety of ways, which I think is really exciting.
It's crazy. UTMB has created this clear funnel. Like they say, this is exactly how you get to UTMB. You got to play by these rules, and it starts right now. And at least this fall, I have not seen very much evidence, like you guys both mentioned, that any elite athletes are like rank and file getting in line and being like, oh, sorry, Javelina. Oh, sorry, Worlds. Oh, sorry, Cape Town. Got to go run UTMB Mexico. Like I just don't see it happening.
Right. No, and it almost like, I mean, we'll probably talk more on this in a future episode or something, but it just emphasizes over racing to some degree. And I think we've moved away from that a good bit the last couple years as a whole in like elite ultra running. So I think being able to space your season out based on more races that are like inspiring you and like have deep competition are going to keep people healthy longer and competing longer.
Any other thoughts, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like even despite how many races there have been this fall, we're still creating a preview episode for Ultra Trail Cape Town because there are still that many names coming to it. And that partly just kind of goes to show how deep this sport is getting, which, yeah, I mean, that's just super cool. It is kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this later when we, break down some of these races, but the 100K is the most competitive race of all the distances. But from a prize money breakdown, the 100 mile has the biggest prize purse.
Yes.
And I wonder if that will be a kind of like a sign of the future for this race in regards to putting more emphasis on, I guess, the longest event being their premier. And because up until this year, the 100K was the longest distance. The 100 mile is new. So I'm curious if, just what both races will look like in future years to come. Because the way the prize purse is broken down says that I think it seems like there's more emphasis on the 100 mile.
Yeah, this is a good conversation too. Like something that I've been thinking about is like, you think about Tarawera, where their premier event for years was the 100K, and then they added on a 100 mile in recent years. And I don't think that's necessarily took off or like brings the exact same competition that the 100K still does. And I'm curious if this will be the same way, or if there are examples of races that have done this structure, like added a 100 mile at a later date and seen that 100 mile take off. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Because I wonder if the 100K just historically has brought deep competition and people are attracted by by that history, you know?
And Leah, to your point earlier, I mean, you mentioned Run Rabbit Run not necessarily attracting the deepest fields, despite one of the largest, if not the largest prize person on the American circuit. Will this increased prize purse at the 100-mile distance be the carrot that moves runners away from the 100K? It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Point.
Well, I think we can talk about like just other interesting facets of the race and how it's built over the course of the episode. Should we move on to just like the general features of maybe the 100K course and what makes it interesting, challenging, stuff like that?
Yeah, totally. I did write down just like a brief, just kind of like a schedule of the whole weekend across all the races for those who are listening and want to know. So the race, I didn't write like actual, everything's in like Cape Town time zone. So
okay.
we'll have to math that one out. But the whole like race weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with the 100-mile starting at 5 p.m. on Friday. So that one's kind of, you know, mirroring kind of your European like UTMB type start where, you know, you immediately have a couple hours of daylight running and then go into the night, and everyone's going through at least one night. Prior to the 100-mile start, the shorter distance races, like the 55K and the 23K, those go off Friday morning. The 55K at 7 a.m. and the 23K at 9 a.m. And then the 100K starts Saturday morning at 6 a.m. And it sounds like there's going to be like live feeds across definitely the 100K, but all of the other races as well, right?
Yeah, with the live broadcast, they're going for a Tour de France. I mean, this is going to be an amazing live broadcast based on what we have heard offline. Like they're going for like a Tour de France type feel. Emily Hawgood, Corinne Malcolm, a few others are going to be commentating the race. The internet connection is apparently going to be excellent, like no crazy latency issues. It's not like Western States or maybe at times Javelina. They're going to have e-bikes out there, like these followers on e-bikes. There's going to be a helicopter out there getting footage. I guess there's going to be like teams of people following each of the podium or the people currently in podium position at the 100-mile, 100K and 55K races, both on the male and female side. So they're going all out, it seems, which is awesome.
It's really cool. And I think something we heard as well is, you know, in a lot of the live coverage we see in races, we're oftentimes just getting the view of the back of the runner, you know, going uphill or going on a downhill. And this race, they're really emphasizing, you know, seeing the face and the work and the grit of the runner that they're following. So following the runner from in front of them, which I think will be really cool just to be in the midst of things and seeing what that looks like for the people who are running, you know, in podium position late in the game.
And if I understand this correctly, they're also trying to make this as like you just said, Leah, like as watchable as possible. So if there's any breaks in the footage or competition, they'll like bump to like interviews that they did with the athletes before the event, other content they've created. So they're really trying to make it like, I don't know if either of you have watched the Tour de France, but very like interspersed like that, which I find very cool.
I think that is so necessary for a, you know, 12-hour plus, you know, event. You can't just have cameras on runners, and there's going to be times where cameras are not on runners, and then there's ultimately downtime. And yeah, being able to strategically fill that downtime with interesting pieces of content, I think is so crucial for an entertaining broadcast.
Yeah, I love this because I think it's something that our races in the US especially can learn from. And I think that's something we could definitely implement for races where we don't have as great cell service, like Western States, for example, and there ends up being, you know, unfortunate downtime whenever things cut out, that you could have this backlog of storytelling and pictures and videos and everything just put together to fill that space. So, you know, Corinne doesn't need to be filling 24 hours of content just by her voice.
One more thing I want to say, actually, before we get to sort of the course beta and whatnot, it seems like if you want to build a premier international event in 2022, the 4 factors are: it's got to be in a destination location, you got to build a really solid elite field, you got to have a baller live coverage feed, and maybe it's debatable, but like good prize money's in there as well as like the 4th factor. Does that sound about like the formula today? Like regardless of whether you're affiliated with UTMB or not, like that, am I kind of, what do you guys think?
I mean, that sounds about right. It's super interesting how like prize money is so low on the hierarchy, because in like road running and track, it's all about appearance fees. And like for the marathon, it's all about like winning a marathon major is bigger than winning gold in the Olympics, because you're going to cash out like $1 million between the race prize purse and your sponsor. And that has been their formula to get the most competitive fields. And that's it's just interesting that that's just not the case with, mountain and trail running.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
I was just going to say, I agree with that. Also, I think a lot of times the sponsors are where the money is coming from for races like this. Like the athlete might negotiate prior, hey, this is a premier, like tier 1 event that should have a tier 1 structure bonus in our contract. Therefore, if I win this, I get $5,000. So therefore, winning $3,500 US dollars here is like not necessarily what's bringing the person there. It's more the course, the competition, going somewhere that they wouldn't have been otherwise on likely a sponsor's or the race's dime, I think is desirable for some.
Oh, that's one more thing. So that's an interesting thought, like kind of tangenting off that.
Yeah.
So this race last year was part of like the UTMB type series, right? Like
the World Tour.
Yeah.
Ultra Trail World Tour.
From a lot of like professional runners, like standpoints regarding contracts, most of like Ultra Trail World Tour races get clumped into one of the higher tiers of races.
Yes.
This being the first year that it's not, I imagine it probably just rolled over for most people, but I hope that this race, gets enough notoriety as its own like solo venture that in contracts for professional athletes, even though, because I guess that's another thing, the title sponsor for this race isn't a shoe company, it's a bank. So it's not like, Hoka or Solomon is necessarily going to encourage all of their runners to come be like, oh, because this is a Hoka race or Solomon race, we're going to have a much larger bonus if you win this. I'm curious to see what this race looks like on various bonus structures of professional runners moving forward. I hope that I guess that could be a scenario where having the prize money from the race is an opportunity for the athlete to be like, you got to at least match this, because they're going to give me this much, they're going to give me $3,500 for winning the 100 mile. So I should get at least $3,500 from my sponsor. So that could at least be a nice bargaining chip and, point of emphasis for the race, in this circumstance, having their own prize purse.
Well, and to tangent off of that, this is a nonpartisan race in the sense that you like you said, it's a bank, not a running brand putting all the money behind it. And yet we still see, for example, Adidas Terex sending 15 to 20 athletes over across the 55K, 23K, 100K, 100 mile. That's fascinating, because that was one of the reasons why UTMB took off, middle of the decade, last decade, is they just deemed it important, and they send athletes over there regardless of, how it fits into their brand ecosystem. So this is exciting times for this race.
Yeah, definitely.
Should we talk about course?
Yeah, which one? Yeah. Which we start with?
I say just because, we're 25 minutes in, maybe we focus on the 100K course, because I think it does share a lot of features with the other ones. So maybe let's talk about like the terrain first. Like, what sticks out to you about like the unique challenges of this race compared to other races we've covered?
Yeah, I like on the website, it described it as a front-loaded technical route. And I think that's very true. The front-loaded, especially in terms of a lot of the climbing and the steepest climbs come in that early 1/3 of the race. And I'm assuming a lot of the technicality does as well. So I think this race is definitely a combination of pretty technical parts, but then also I do think it's pretty cruisy at times, which I think that combination is where like our North American runners seem to excel, is whenever you can have this combo of technical sections, cruisy sections, long-ish climbs, but nothing like the length you see in a lot of the Euro races.
Yeah, it's at first it sounded much scarier that the course is front loaded in terms of the first half being harder than the second half. But thinking about it, like actually being there, I would rather kind of do the harder half first on a fresher mind and legs, because even if the first half is easier, I still have to do it before getting to the second half. And that would only just increase my chances of rolling an ankle, falling, tripping on rocks. That's also coming from someone who doesn't run much of any technical terrain. So, that's what stood out as one of the more difficult elements of the course, is that everyone says like there's a lot more rocks out there than one might expect. And then kind of digging through some of the pictures of the race, there's a couple sections where, you look at the trail and it's 100%, like golf ball to softball sized rocks. And that is just what the trail is made of. And that is my nightmare.
Yeah, I think the 100K, so I think we mentioned earlier, it does one big loop, and it's 40, just almost 5,000 meters in 98K is how it's advertised on the website, which equates to roughly 61 miles with just over 16,000 feet of climbing. We did note from looking at prior years that it doesn't follow the exact course that it did in prior years. We were specifically looking at like Jim Walmsley's Strava from last year, where it looks a little different, but roughly the same. So I think in terms of mileage and vert, they're nearly identical courses. But I think some of the trails you take, and I think this year there might be a little bit more technicality. I'm not sure if you guys agree or disagree with that.
We had a chance to talk with Cody Reed, who's been, he won the race, I think, was it last year or 2 years ago?
I think a few years ago.
A couple
years ago. One of the greatest upsets of all time, beating out Francois Dane.
Dang.
But he talked about this race being a little harder, I think. Because there's a video on the Cape Town website of Jim and Cody sitting in a bar, and it's before Jim wins the race last year. And Jim talks about this updated course clearly being harder, but he's going to, quote, play it as the ball lies, and he'll still fight to beat Cody's time from the previous year. So I think this one is a little bit more technical. Yeah.
And I think all in all, the course has roughly 6 major climbs, with the biggest climb being around the 20K mark. And I think you go up and hit Table Mountain, which is right around 1,000 meters or 3,500 feet. And that's the biggest climb of the day. And I think that it's about, 3,000 feet in 3.5 miles. And then the biggest climb after that is about 2,000 feet in 3.5 miles. So overall, like, not huge climbs. I think 2 big ones, and then everything else, it looks very relentless. That was the one takeaway from me previewing all the data online, was just the relentless, punchy climbs. I think that'll really tire you out towards the end.
We've had 3 American winners at this race: Courtney Dauwalter, Cody Reed, Jim Walmsley. Is there anything about those runners that says anything about this course too? Like, do you think there's a type of runner? Because we're about to talk about the men's and women's fields. Are you looking for a type of runner in these races based on this course profile that's bound to do well?
I mean, I initially thought, like, yeah, there's a type, but then when you actually say the names out loud, like, I feel like those 3 runners are actually all pretty different. Whereas, like, Courtney's definitely excels at like the very long, very difficult courses. Jim has been great at kind of the medium distance, more runnable. Cody's kind of jumped back and forth and had success at both, maybe not quite at the highest end of Jim or Courtney. But I think that kind of goes to show you might actually be able to win this race a couple different ways. Kind of like Leah said, there's some pretty punchy climbs. I mean, of course, it's going to be difficult when they throw a VK at you 20K into the race, into 100K. But there's actually, kind of looking at the course profile, the climbs are very punchy, but there's some decently long kind of approaches in between some of the climbs where, someone like Courtney would be able to gain distance on the actual climbing and descending. Someone like Jim might be able to gain distance on the in-betweens of the climbs. So that, might lead to some pretty fun yo-yoing between, runners over the course of the race.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I think when I was looking at the entrance, Finn, I was picking out athletes who I felt like had a good combination of both speed and spending time in the mountains. So I wanted to see somebody that's done really well at a mountain race, but then has also done quite well at a more runnable, maybe short distance race as well. And I think it's interesting too. Marianne Hogan got second place for the women to Courtney last year here.
That's right.
And if you just look at her last year of results, she's done all those things. She won Bandera. She got third at Western States. She got second at UTMB. And then she did very well here. So I think it's that person that can run on technical terrain, can run fast when it matters, but then can also fare quite well in a mountain race. And I think those are the people that'll do the best.
By the way, a little bit of an aside here, but I think, and this is credit to how good of a season Marianne Hogan has had. It seems like an eternity ago that she got second to Courtney at Cape Town. And that was last year.
Ago. Yeah.
Interesting. The other thing, the weather here seems like an interesting point to bring up, because we were talking with Cody and he mentioned that you almost want to be sort of cycling through different layers at different points of the course. It can get very cold, very windy on certain sections. You're exposed in the sun at some points, then there's cloud cover in certain parts and temperatures drop. So I think I don't know what the strategy is going in when you have to cycle between different weather systems, but that's interesting to me too.
Just looking at the mandatory gear list, because there is mandatory gear for all distances. Trying to learn. Okay. It's a decent amount of gear. And I guess, there's probably scenarios where over, 1 year you might not touch anything. And there might be other years where you might actually be throwing all the stuff on, the very top end of a climb. And then 20 minutes later, you're throwing all of this stuff back into your pack. And for a, hyper competitive race like this, that kind of leads into the transition time and efficiency of how dialed your gear is, how quick you are in and out of aid stations, that sort of thing. Because even more so for 100K, where it's be between 9 and 12 hours, that's much shorter than 20 plus hours for a race. And if you are still having to deal with some of this gear, it's going to be very important that you know where everything is in your pack and don't waste a lot of time trying to figure out what to do with your layering system.
Yeah, going in and out of these different climates reminded me a lot of the Trans-Gran Canaria course, where you're up in the mountains, then you're down on the beaches, you're in various elements throughout the day, and you actually you end up using almost all the required gear that is required of you. And it was quite interesting then to see a lot of the people who are signed up for this race across the 100-mile and the 100K distance. A lot of them have actually done Trans-Gran Canaria in the past. So I don't think these courses are necessarily that similar. I think Trans-Gran Canaria is quite a bit more technical, but I think a lot of the elements are really similar.
So I have a question for the mandatory gear list that also has existed on the UTMB gear list. So an example, it says for hydration, you have to have a minimum of 1.5 liters capacity, but you have to have, of those 1.5 liters, 300 milliliters must be in reserve at all times. And I haven't read down the rules, but usually if you get checked for something and you don't have it, there's either a time penalty or a disqualification. If I am blowing up in the race and I go through all of my water and I use my 300 milliliter of reserve water because it's an emergency, and then they check me at the aid station and I don't have it, do I get penalized for that?
Or if you're using the water for topical cooling purposes too.
Yeah, well, who's to say what I'm using with it? Or do I have to make sure to drink just down to 300 milliliters of water left? Because if I use that, I'm going to get penalized.
Letter of the law.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would argue you probably need to keep 300 milliliters left, to be honest.
Then that is a stupid rule. The same thing goes for the reserve of says you must have 250 calories of food in reserve at all times. What if I need it?
Yeah.
But it's an emergency, but I'm not so much in an emergency that I'm, just trying to finish. Maybe it's an emergency to not blow up because I'm still in the top 3. This is a pickle.
This is a great example.
How does this work?
Yeah, I haven't heard this before in terms of like having, I think I've heard like extra food, but I haven't ever heard that with regards to water, which is interesting.
Yeah, this actually all got brought up. This is what goes on in the mind of David Laney. This is what this is what we're talking about before races as his coach. Like, these are the types of scenarios we're talking about.
Hey, this is a great example too of how casual due diligence in preparation for an analysis episode can uncover some maybe rules that don't make so much sense.
Perhaps.
Brett Hornig doing the people's work.
This is what keeps Brett up.
We must get to the bottom. Yeah, I mean, it's confusing. Same thing goes for the headlamp batteries. Like, am I allowed to use my spare headlamp batteries, or if I use them and they check and my spares are actually dead? I don't know.
Well, before we preview the men's and women's fields, I want to throw this question out to both of you. I know that we don't have like an official hierarchy of races in the sport in terms of like what's important, what's like an A event, et cetera. Like, that's probably a whole episode to itself. But let's just say that like the people that we're about to preview, they get a podium here, they win. How much street cred does a podium or a win at Ultra Trail Cape Town give you in the wider context of our sport? Leah, what do you think?
Good question. I think it gives you some. Like, I don't think it's a Western States podium, a UTMB podium by any means, but I think it's kind of equivalent to like a Lavaredo, Trans Gran Canaria, Cape Town. I feel like these are all draw very similar competition. So I think something like that.
How about you, Brett?
I mean, I think winning the race, it really depends on who you beat.
Yeah.
Because if you win the race and there's the competition for the race has totally died and there's no one there, I think a race, like, people will notice that, but if you get second in this race and it was the deepest field ever and everyone's, couple minutes apart from each other coming all the way through, I think that's where a lot of the weight of a win here, exists. And historically in previous years, all the races have been moderately deep and pretty competitive, pretty elite, especially at the very upper end. So, I think it still kind of holds true with this year, where if you win and, you kind of see the history of who has won it in recent years, it's a big deal.
If you're a runner in a contract season and maybe your year hasn't gone exactly the way you've wanted it to go, could a good performance here rescue said season and maybe reinvigorate your relationship with the brand or your prospects for the next year?
I mean, I think it can help because there are a lot of people in this race who have sponsors.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And I think there's not a lot happening towards the end of the year. So it gives you that one more talking point right as December rolls around.
Yeah, if you were kind of like right on the bubble between, if a brand was on the bubble with you and someone else, and then all of a sudden you just go and, wreck a bunch of people who are full-time pros, internationally. That's a great bargaining chip for you, for sure.
Leah, who are some of your favorite contenders and their associated storylines in the women's field?
Okay, let's take a look here. So I think Camelia Bruas, who got second at UTMB in 2021, running just over 24 hours. She also got 10th place at Western States this year off of not ideal training for her coming into it. I think she was coming off an injury. And then just beat Ruth Croft at Les Templiers, which like Ruth Croft has been rather unbeatable the last couple of years. So, I think Ruth had a good day there too. So I don't think either of them like were struggling out there. They both had really solid days. And the reason I really like Camila is the fact that kind of what I spoke to earlier is evidence of being able to excel on a faster, like 50-ish mile course like Les Templiers is, but then also having documented success at a big mountain race like UTMB. And then like, throwing her name in the hat at Western States, like she can do it all. And I think this is going to be the perfect combination, especially coming off of the fast race she just had at Les Templiers. So she's the one I'm most excited to see race because I think she's really going to put it all together for a pretty great race.
One more thing there. She's raced Cape Town before too, back in 2018. She got 11th place. So it wasn't like her day, but she has course experience too.
That's helpful. Yeah. I actually didn't know that. That's exciting. I think we have Mimi Kotka running as well. And she won Lavaredo this year and then had a DNF at UTMB this year, but then has gotten third at UTMB in 2021. So she's a pretty solid racer. I mean, she has had her fair share of DNFs over the last couple of years. I think in and out of some injury, but when she shows up, she really shows up. And I think we saw that at Lavaredo this year as well. And she's just really solid, especially in the mountains. So I'm excited to see what she'll put together. And then we have our third place women's finisher from last year, Maryline Nakachi from France. I'm excited to see what she does, if she can improve on what she did here last year as well, getting third to Courtney and Marianne. And then I think this year she got fourth in Madeira, and I think she has a top 10 at UTMB to her name as well. So those are some of the international women I'm excited for. And then we have a couple of Americans, Nicole Bitter, Olivia Amber, and Kelly Wolf. And I think Kelly Wolf has had a really solid but probably understated year so far. She tends to go to some of these big international mountain races, but has been doing usually a shorter distance at each of them. So it doesn't get as big of headliner knowledge and appreciation. But she won the Lavaredo 80K this year, and she won the Madeira 85K. And then followed that up with the DNF at CCC this year. So I think she races internationally quite well. Whenever she when she's not struggling with injury, or maybe whenever she doesn't have a DNF, I think she really does show up. So I'm excited to see what kind of shape she's in.
Brett, any other names stick out for you?
Those are definitely some of the heavy hitters there. There was a few Russian athletes that have had some pretty solid race results in the last 12 months or so. Varvara Shikanova, Solomon athlete, was third at Ultra Pyrenees just a month and a bit ago. And then also Anne Ashworth from South Africa, who was fourth in the race last year at Ultra Trail Cape Town, also returns to hopefully improve upon that placing.
Yeah, and I think
more names. Oh, go ahead.
I forgot to mention Katerina Mitiev, who is, I think, wife to Dmitry Mitiev, who's also racing. Yeah. She's really solid as well. She's had a fourth place at TDS and I think has been on the podium in nearly all of her races in the last 2 years, probably aside from that fourth place at TDS, which is an exceptional result nonetheless.
One more name I'll throw out there, Nicole Bitter, who just came off a third place finish at Javelina. Very interested to see if it's, given the level of competition she aspires to each race, if it's possible to turn it around and race 100K 3-4 weeks later. Like Brett, I know you just raced Javelina and you're not really running that much. So I'm very
gone 6 miles since the race.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, she's obviously proven at Western States, Black Canyon, Javelina, and is definitely a name that's recognizable. And but yeah.
Yeah, what I like about Nicole is I feel like she really excels at the flat, fast things. That's when we have seen all of her great race results. But she is not afraid to race the more burly mountain races, despite training relatively flat. I think they live in Texas. She's done the Tushers 70K. I think I raced her there once. She's done Madeira. She has lot. I think, she did canyons this year. So she definitely puts her hat in it for some of the more mountainous races and like does pretty well and like holds her own for sure.
Leah, do you think how much of a given and or a struggle will it be to see one of these American women on the podium in this race?
I feel like Kelly Wolf is the most likely podium contender. Olivia Amber, she lives in San Francisco and she's a North Face athlete. She's also racing. This will be her longest race yet. And she's had some good success here in the United States. So I am really excited to see what she can put together. But I will say, I think just based on Kelly Wolf's level of experience and success at, international mountain races, I think she's our most likely podium contender for sure.
Any other thoughts, Brett?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. It seems like at the very, say like top 3 contenders for the ladies race, there's some because there's a handful who are now running this race who didn't finish UTMB.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of looking at some like pretty big potential redemption stories. And, some of these people who didn't finish at UTMB were people who we mentioned in our preview show of being like podium contenders. So when we're talking podium contenders for UTMB, you're pretty much almost favoriting them for any other mountain race throughout the year. So, it's super competitive at the very top end. And I think that to get on the podium is something, Kelly Wolf has had performances in the past that kind of equate to that good. It again just comes down to like, which day is she going to have? Is it going to be a win the race or a not finish the race type day?
One thing I think that deserves mentioning before we get into our free trail picks here is that the prize purse for free trail is insane. So if any one of us gets these picks right, or if anyone who plays gets these picks right, I think Stuart, the race director, was talking with Dylan, and it'll be a free race entry, free flight, free hotel accommodations for whoever wins. So there's a lot on the line here. And we were talking about that offline. Leah, who's your top 5 and why?
Yeah, who are your picks? Let's hear your picks first.
The most successful of us
your
3.
Picks off of mine.
Yeah, just curious.
Okay. So I've got Camelia Bruas for first place. I guess I should have went backwards. Whatever, I'll go down first through 5th. Then I have Mimi Kotka for second place, Kelly Wolf for third, Ekaterina Mitieva for fourth, and Maryline Nakache from France, who got third here. I have her in 5th place.
Those were not my 5.
How about you, Brett?
I thought about just being like, whoa, I picked all the same exact people. We do have the same overall winner.
Nice.
So I think, Camila Bruas is going to win. I have Maryline Nakache moving up from her third last year to get second, Mimi Kotka third, and then Varvara Shikanova in fourth, and then Kelly Wolf rounding out 5th. And I'm kind of going just a little bit off of like race history in the past year, as well as maybe like just potential like who might be most motivated to like really crush this race. I'm just trying to get in the headspace.
Wait, who are your 1-2, Brett?
I had Camila Bruas and Maryline Nakache.
And then Leah, who were your 1-2?
I had Camelia and Mimi Kotka.
Okay. Yeah, I have Mimi Kotka at 1 and Camille Brias at 2. And I do think it's going to be like, because we've talked about both of them in the UTMB preview, and I think Mimi was probably at least one of our projected winners before she DNF'd. And I think that's going to be an interesting storyline for the race, is like their battle for 1-2. Brett, I was hoping that you'd have a similar 1-2 so that we could have an agreed upon storyline there, but unfortunately that was undermined.
Well, unfortunate. I could always change things on the actual fantasy picks.
We talked about a fantasy free trail conspiracy here where we all pick the same stuff, but no, we're gonna stick to our guns. So I got Mimi Koka number 1, Camille Brias number 2, Ekaterina Mityev 3. I got Kelly Wolf 4, and then my flyer pick is Olivia Amber at 5. And I'm looking at her Strava right now, and she just spent like 6 straight weeks between 14 and 16 hours time on feet. From what I understand in our pre-race convo, like she's totally unencumbered when it comes to other life stress. Like she's on a work sabbatical right now. And I think that some pretty cool things can happen when like your one focus is running and you can really recover and stuff. So I know this is her first international, or one of her first international races and longest race to date, like you said, Leah, but I gotta put on my biased American hat here and hope that she can get the day that her training may indicate is possible.
Yeah, her training's been beautiful. I'm excited to see how she does.
Yeah. Cool. Any other cool storylines in the women's field here, or like face-offs or anything like that you're excited to see?
I got a question.
Yeah.
With this field, are we on course record watch? Like, what do we think?
I'm very curious to see how the course runs compared to last year's, being that it is a little different.
Yeah.
I think if it were the same as last year, I don't think we're on course record watch. Courtney beat Marianne by 55 minutes last year, which is mind blowing. And Marianne's a very solid racer herself. So I think people would run within maybe 20 minutes of what Courtney did last year. So Courtney ran 11:20, which I believe was a course record. Marianne ran 12:15, and then third place, Maryline ran 12:27. So the whole podium was under 12:30 for the women. I think we'll see the whole podium under 12:30, but I don't know if we'll see 11:20 like Courtney ran.
I mean, that brings up another interesting question, Leah. How big do you think the spread is going to be in this race for, let's just say, the top 5? Like, are we talking about minutes or hours here, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the top 5 will be within 45 minutes of each other, probably. Whereas exciting. Last year, the spread was an hour 7. That's not bad. I think we're going to see, I bet you we see the top 5 under what we saw third place in last year, is my guess. We'll see top 5.
So a more put together, exciting race from like a true, yeah.
Yeah, because I even think the race director might have alluded to that too. It's just like we had a couple pretty competitive people last year, but maybe was lacking a little bit of the depth. Whereas this year, I think it's pretty deep compared to what they've seen in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the men's field. Brett, what are your favorite storylines and contenders coming in?
So, there's this 100K is a cool distance because you do really get a sweet mixture of big mountain 100-mile kind of experts, and then some, more runnable, faster experts as well, really overlapping for this kind of like fun middle ground distance. And, like the ladies race, I think we're seeing that, we see that in the men's race as well. Like with Hans Naumberger from Germany, DINAFIT athlete, he's probably looking to redeem that DNF at UTMB. Just won Lavaredo this year. So motivation might be high, maybe a few less overall race miles in the legs for him. Dmitry Mityev from Russia, Adidas Terex, Red Bull athlete as well. Second at Ultra Pyreneu. And then over the course of the last year, he was first or second in every ultra that he did, which was, I think, like 6 or 7 races. So that's pretty solid. And then we have the highest returner from last year, Sebastian Sphaler from France, running for Solomon, I believe. So, right?
Yes. How did he do here last year?
Second to Walmsley.
Yeah.
Oh.
Went out a little bit more controlled because I forget, the name is escaping me, but it was another guy leading Jim for a while before Jim pulled away, I think on the first big climb up Table Mountain. And then Seb actually started getting pretty close to Jim before ultimately starting to fade a little bit. But similarly to Seb's most recent race at the Festival de Templier, the 80K, he was second to Jim, about a month ago, and not too far off. So seems to be in, pretty good shape and has experience on the course. So that'll be exciting. Who else? Daniel Claassen from South Africa was fifth at the race last year. He did just have a DNF at Transvolcania last month. I don't know if that was, just a bad day and saved it for Ultra Trail Cape Town, if that was maybe the goal race, or if that was like an injury type thing. So there, if it was like a preventative drop for the sake of Ultra Trail Cape Town, there could be some, extra motivation there as well. And then, we've got a couple interesting American names like Drew Holman. This is his first international race, and Drew's exciting because he's like such a gutsy racer. Just totally trashed himself at States the last few years.
The finish line scene was just incredible.
Yeah. And,
he held the throw up bag up though. He did not turn it down.
Yeah. Okay. So there's, we're puking on the track, and so I was thinking, is that a Western States magic type extra layer of motivation, or can that level of competition be brought to another race? That's a question I'm very curious about. And then Jared Hazen's also on the entrance list, which he's another one where I'm like, for better part of the last few years, have just been question marks in regards to which Jared is showing up today, because Jared has the potential to win the whole thing. Just don't know I don't know what his training's been like or how he's feeling going into this one.
Well, one thing about Drew, he's very selective about the races he does, and he gives himself plenty of time to rest and recharge. Like, I'm sure he could have done CCC or UTMB back in August, and I think he just like actively chose not to do it the same way, Leah, like you were mentioning, like you said, not this year. And so I do think that we're going to get like a whole Drew Holman at this race. Like, he'll be ready to go.
I think so too. I love watching Drew race because I think he nails it. Like, he doesn't really have bad days either. So I think he's really consistent and strong and knows how to race. So I'm excited to see how he does in a pretty deep international field, especially.
And then with Jared, it's like which Jared shows up, because there's no average race for him. Like, he doesn't finish sixth in races. Either it's spectacular or there's a DNF. And so I just can't see him finishing like fourth or fifth in this race. It's either like first or second, or he's not finishing, something to that effect. And I say that with all of the respect. Like, I love Jared, like, great interview, great guy, totally. Great runner, one of the best of our generation.
It's so, Jared's a very ballsy racer. He races to win for a significant amount longer time than most people race to win. Like at Western States, there's 25 different guys who start the race and they're all racing to win. But by the 50K mark, half of them have backed off and being like, okay, now I'm racing for top 10. Jared was racing to win until he could no longer race at all. And to be able to fight the demons of slow down is very, very impressive. To just blindly be like, I don't know if I'm going to finish, but like, I listened to his pre-race interview with you, and he was like, when Adam started to move, it's like, oh, I think Adam's going to win, but I want to win. So I'm just going to cover Adam's moves as long as possible. And covering those moves did not last to the finish, but he just went for it until explosion. And I think there's a huge amount of bravery in that. Like, that's impressive to just ignore all the warning signs and go for it. So,
oh no, he gets a single track salute.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Very, very brave racer.
Trademark pending.
Yep. But yeah, so I'm curious. I'm excited to see what Jared ends up doing, because he will make the coverage of the race very exciting. And, Drew will do it a different way where, he is going to run like whatever the race he needs to run, like without distraction, to get to the finish line as fast as possible, which in many cases, or at least with his, historical, years of racing, for him, it's being pretty conservative at the start and then like closing very hard. So we will see if we have a Drew home run out of that one.
So good.
So
any other names, Leah, that stick out to you?
Yeah. I don't know. Did you mention Per Aurel from Spain, Brett? So that's Ragnar de Bot's, her husband. And I like that they show up at races together and usually race the same distance. In this race, she's racing the 100-mile and he's running the 100K. He DNF'd La Vereda this year, but was third at Trans Gran Canaria. So he's really solid. He's always in the mix, like with like Pal Capel and those guys. So I'm really excited to see how he does. Same comments on Drew and Jared. Something about Jared though, man, he races the way I want to race, like at least one time in my life, just to see how it'll go. But I don't know if he's had a great international performance yet. He's kind of hit or miss. Like I think he performs pretty well like on US soil, but I think a lot of his international attempts haven't gone quite like he probably would want to. So I'm hoping this is the one for him. There's a Romanian guy, Ionel Christian Manole. He was first at Val d'Aran by UTMB last year, I believe, and then fourth at Ultra Pyrrhenu, but has a slew of DNFs on his ITRA. So Madeira, UTMB, Gran Canaria, and I think those are all just this year. So I feel like when he's on, but I'm curious, if what this DNF streak says about maybe a history with injury or maybe just tough racing this year. Yeah. And the only other thing I wanted to add was, I think Hans Nürnberger is definitely a favorite in this race. And I think, Dmitry Matiev will be up there as well, but they think they raced at some point in the last year and Hans beat Dmitry by nearly 45 minutes in like a 100K, maybe 70-mile type race. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting for podium positioning because I think like Brett mentioned, Dmitry has been like on a podium in every single race since 2018, pretty much. So he's super solid.
A couple others here. Johan Lance was on the podium here in 2018, third place. Actually raced his Swedish teammate Ela Olsen to the finish. I think they were like 4 months apart, 4 minutes apart, not 4 days. Not 4 days.
4 months.
It felt like 4 days, but it was 4 minutes. And then I got to give a shout out to another American, Michelino Sanseri, who hails from the western slopes of the Grand Tetons in Driggs, Idaho. I feel like that's just a badass training location. So that deserves a single track salute as well. Leah and I know him because he's performed well at Speed Goat in recent years. I think he won the race in like five low a couple of years back. And this will be his first, I think, international race and his longest distance to date, but super strong guy. And just wanted to throw those two in there.
Yeah, I think he just got fourth at Pikes Peak this summer as well. So pretty solid result considering that brought some pretty deep competition this year.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the marathon. So he did also have to go down the mountain, which
Brett,
that's important.
Brett, I feel like I didn't give you enough credit for Drew home run, but that was a really good one.
I know it's pretty incredible that I actually don't have kids. These dad jokes.
I feel like I don't give you enough credit in real time for your humor, and then I go back and listen to the episode, and I'm just cracking up. So we're doing it live right now.
I don't know. I think the Brett Hornig quote of the year, though, is just the depth is so deep. I think that was Speed Goat.
No, I think my favorite one was talking about people getting hazed into Flagstaff.
That was good.
That one did not get enough love. The depth is too deep. Is deep. That was so good.
Yeah, I giggle about that one like once a week still.
Gets a lot of mileage.
Yeah. Oh, one name that we have not yet to bring up, which was kind of unfortunate that they're not in the 100K anymore, is Anton Krupicka.
Oh yeah.
That would have been exciting to see, but it sounds like he's not quite like at this point in the year, not ready to full on race the 100K to the capacity that he would want to. And it sounded like from your pre-race interview with him that it was like, I wouldn't be able to do the course justice for how competitive I would like to be. So he's going to do the 55K instead.
I feel like, we talked about how in the live coverage, they're going to have permanently camera people on the top 3 runners in each event, male and female. I feel like if Anton was in the 100K, they would make an exception and add a 4th crew, and they would just follow him no matter what, which would be a great move.
It'd be a crowd pleaser.
That would increase viewership for sure. But
Brett,
I think
who are your free trail picks?
Oh yeah, so for the win, I'm going with Seb Svaler. 2nd place last year, experience on the course. Seems fit this year and has had success in kind of I would say this seems to be a little bit on the long side from a time standpoint for his racing kind of pocket. But, having gotten 2nd last year and potentially knowing what needs to be fixed to land atop the podium, I think he's going to do it. Then I've got Dmitry Mityaev to get 2nd and Hans Naumberger 3rd. I think Drew Holman is going to work his way up to 4th. It wouldn't surprise me if he is not in 4th until, the last 5 or 10 miles of the race. And then I have Daniel Klaassen to round out the top 5 to be the first South African runner to finish.
How about you, Leah?
I have Hans in 1st, Seb Speller for 2nd again, Dimitri in 3rd because he hasn't been off the podium in like 4 years anywhere. Got Drew also in 4th, and then Pierre Aurel for 5th.
I've got Seb Speller 1, Dimitri 2, Drew Home Run 3, Hannes 4, and then my flyer, my Olivia Amber of the men's field is Michelino Sanseri in 5th.
Oh, wow.
All right, cool.
And I guess something worth talking about is the time. So Jim ran the course record last year in 9:47. Seb finished in 10:16. And then there was a big, almost 30-minute gap to 3rd, which was Andreas Retier for 3rd. But all top 5 were under 11 hours last year. And I do know, I think Jim broke the prior course record by only about 3 minutes. And it's a South African who's also running the 100-miler this year, which will be pretty cool. But yeah, I'm curious this year if we'll see similar times or, anybody threatening that course record.
Yeah.
I guess part of that too can also be weather dependent. If it's hot, things are just going to be slow. Because I remember looking at a lot of the race footage from last year, and it seemed like every time they went up a climb, they got into the clouds and into the fog, and it didn't look like it was so cold where people had to stop and throw on lots of additional layers. It looked like it more just kind of kept things in pretty ideal conditions, which definitely led to faster times. I don't know if I saw any pictures last year of people, dumping water on themselves. Looking at Cape Town's weather, which I'm not sure exactly how that would change depending on where you are on the course. It looked pretty mild, but it showed overcast, I think, the whole time, which can be good, but that could sometimes also lead to some extra humidity, which, 70 degrees and humid doesn't feel too great. So I'm curious to see how weather can affect the times. It doesn't affect the racing at all. So I guess what I'm saying is I have no idea what the time's going to be, but I think the top 5 are going to be pretty close to each other. Kind of as with what we're seeing more and more of, at these high profile races, is that there's less colossal blowups and tighter spreads from, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm. Will it be harder to get an American on the podium in the men's field or the women's field, in your opinions?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think Drew is our shot for the podium in the men's field. I think it's going to be really similar, honestly. Like, I think him and Kelly Wolf I have similar shots at a podium spot. I think Drew I could see him having a higher likelihood of the podium, just ever so slightly.
Yeah.
I think at the very top end, in terms of like who's had their best career performances, Jared Hazen could win the whole thing. And I think potentially place the highest out of any of the Americans. But I don't think I'm going to be the one to, bet all my money on that just quite yet. So I kind of then fall back to, I think Kelly Wolf of all the Americans, just because she's got 2 solid international finishes this year. And this is Drew's first time racing internationally, which I don't know how early he's going to be able to get over there. Hopefully he's already over there.
He's there. Yeah.
Okay. So as long as he's not like all messed up from the travel, like jet lag and such, cause that learning how much time you need to kind of get back to homeostasis after a long flight like that. Varies a ton from person to person. Someone like Kelly Wolf, who's had so much international racing experience, knows probably pretty well how to manage all those different variables.
Yeah, I also think we forgot to mention Kelly got 4th here, I think back in 2018. So she's raced here before too. So I think that experience will give her a little bit of a leg up as well.
Any other thoughts on the men's field?
I think I don't like, did we all say, no, Leah, who'd you say was going to win?
I said Hans.
Hans.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's quite as, I feel like the men's like race is a little bit more open in terms of the winner. It could potentially be a name that we have not said.
That's true.
Whereas I feel like on the ladies' side of our picks, I feel more confident that the winner's coming out of those picks than on the men's side. But I think, again, I think I'm just really excited to see a race of, this caliber and also have equally as high of a caliber live stream and coverage.
Before we go, I feel like we need to quickly acknowledge some of the interesting runners and storylines in the 100-mile and 55K fields. Leah, are there any particular runners in the 100-mile that you're excited to follow?
I think Ragna. I believe she DNF'd Lavaredo this year and DNF'd UTMB. But other than that, she's just been on the last year. And I think she was dealing with some injury and then just some external pressure, I think, for UTMB that led to her DNF. But I personally think she will run away with it in the 100-miler. And I'm really excited to see her have a solid day. And I think we also have Hillary Allen racing the 100-miler as well. On the men's side, there was a Russian, Alexei Tolstenko, who runs for Adidas Terex as well. 4th in Madeira and won Penny Glosa in 2021 and has a top 15 finish at, I think, the 2021 UTMB. So I think he's coached by Dmitry Mitiev, which is kind of cool. Cool. So I'm excited to see how he does as well.
How about you, Brett?
We got Elov Olsen in the 100-mile.
Yes.
So someone who does have experience on this course. I was not as well known for like 100-mile. It seems like he's won some slightly shorter, faster races. So I'm curious if this is like an attempt, like a distance or career pivot where he is with his running to like, really try and get down that mountainous 100-mile. And then is Fotis Dissimopoulos of Greece, did he win the Spartathlon this past year? Was that?
I don't know, but if you pronounced that correctly, that's an amazing name.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got that first try.
I thought you said photosynthesis.
I mean, if that's how we're winning Spartathlon, then we need to get this guy on the pod because we need to learn about being able to soak up the sun. But not that winning Spartathlon really translates at all to the Ultra Trail Cape Town 100-mile. Yeah. It is interesting though that someone who could have that high profile of a faster win would go and do a mountainous 100-mile like this. Leah, are you fact checking me right now?
I am because
okay, good.
No, you're right.
I heard some typing. Okay.
Well, I really wanted you to because I didn't want to continue on with.
I know that's what I was a little nervous for. No, you are right. Yeah, 21 hours, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting too because he ran an amazing race there too. That was third fastest time to Yannis Koros at Spartathlon. Both he has the top 2 times.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So this will be impressive. I'm excited for this one. I didn't notice that about him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then what
the
about
only other one? Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was switching distances, so you got to go first.
Oh yeah,
what do you got,
I was going to the prior course record holder from the 100K, Prodigal Kamalo from South Africa. He does not race much, and if you're familiar with like ITRA scores whatsoever, his is down in the 600s, which is interesting compared to all the other men who are like 850 and above. So I think that speaks more to the fact that he doesn't race very much. And if he does race, it's just local South Africa races. But he did have the prior course record that Jim Walmsley only took by 3 minutes. So he's stepping it up in distance for the 100-miler, and I'm excited for that.
One last thing on the 100-mile. So Elov Olsen did finish second in the 100K back in 2018. He finished 4 minutes ahead of Johan Lance. So there is that. He does have a little bit of a history here.
Okay, cool. What about the shorter races?
Robbie Simpson in the 55K. I think that, in this, again, this is just my perspective, and maybe it's because I don't follow the sub ultra and like 50K aspect of our sport that much, but I feel like John Albin and Killian and those folks get a lot of credit on like the Sears and All circuit, the OCC circuit, but Robbie Simpson has 2 back-to-back podium finishes at OCC. He's raced Sears and All 10 years in a row, and I think he has top 10 finishes each of those 10 years, including a bunch of second places, almost a win there. So, and he's been in Cape Town for like a month now, just purely getting course recon. So he's one of the standout favorites for me.
This is an Adidas Terex athlete?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, just to show how many athletes Adidas is sending out. And it's not just in one race, it's across quite a few. And a lot. They're going to clean up in the shorter races, aren't they? Because the 23K as well, which, that was the thing that I forgot to mention earlier, was the prize money, at least on the website, the 23K prize money is the same as the 100K.
Dang.
Wow.
So, that's going to be a high dollars per hour payday for whoever wins.
I feel like because it's an international race, you have to create that incentive to get people to, like, if you're going to race for 2 hours hard and you're going to fly, 12, 18 hours to get there, that's probably a good character.
And I think it's cool. Like I huge amounts of respect to the race director for not just having the shorter race being like, oh, it's shorter, it's easier, therefore it's less important. There are people who start trail running and realize, oh, I'm very good at racing a couple hours very hard. And those people I'm very jealous of because they get to go run really fast and for not that long of a time. But that is a professional side of the sport. And those are real races too. And they are also very exciting. So I think it's really cool that there's that emphasis is put on the shorter races of like, no, this is a very important race as well. So yeah, just kudos to Ultra Trail Cape Town on, continuing to, really try and field, some competitive elite spots across every distance.
I'm stoked. I think this has been an awesome episode. Always great convening with you guys to geek out on another race. Can't wait to do it again. Any final thoughts, Leah, on this coming weekend and the race at hand?
No, I'm so excited for it. So much so that, I'm already like booking my tickets for next year. I need to be there.
How about you, Brett? Brett, are you fact checking Leah right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hacked the flight mainframe and Leah already bought plane tickets. I was just seeing what time it was over there right now, just to start figuring out what time of the day I'm going to have to watch these live streams. It's 2:30 in the afternoon over here on the West Coast, and it's 12:30 a.m. over there. So for the 100K, that would then start in like 6 more hours. Yeah, we'll be burning that midnight oil.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, the last thing I'll say, shout out to Stu, the race director. I'm not sure if I don't know how you pronounce it. I think it's McConaughey, his last name. And I just think this is an alliteration. I know alliterations, but he's a student of the state of the art when it comes to events and putting on a world-class thing. And I'm stoked to see this all go down on over the weekend. So hell yeah, Stu.
I would love to hear Stu's thoughts after the race on how everything went and maybe what to see moving forward, maybe a potential race director podcast.
Hell yeah.
We should just have a post-race show and he should just be on it with us.
Yes. He's my new favorite person, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Shout out, Stu. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.